what effect has the change in the administration or the new ICE policies had on your immigration clients?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of fear out there. That's for sure. We get a lot of calls, right? Basically, just want to know, are they in danger? How can they defend themselves? What can they do? It's only been about 2 weeks, right? Since new administration took power, but we've already seen quite a bit of action, right, in immigration law. And undoubtedly there'll be more. So it's almost a day-to-day thing, where things are coming up constantly.
Welcome to Harry Handles It, a podcast where we dive into the world of personal growth, success strategies, and everything in between. I'm your host, Levin Nalbandyan, and today we're going to chat with an incredible guest who has some amazing insights to share. Remember, no matter what life throws your way, I'm here to help you handle it. So let's get started.
I'm excited to welcome our new guest, Ruben Espinoza, who's a distinguished Los Angeles-based immigration attorney. Ruben, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Harry. Yeah, doing okay this morning. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your practice area and what you do for immigration clients?
Yeah, so my firm handles a wide variety of immigration matters. Anything from affirmative applications with the civil agency, USCIS, to removal defense cases before EOIR, that's the immigration court. We also handle appeals before the BIA and the Ninth Circuit. And most of what we do is family-based immigration. We do asylum, we do U visas. So we do a variety of work. The only thing we probably don't do much of or any of is really employment law. Immigration, that tends to be its own specialty. But other than that, we've pretty much seen everything.
And what inspired you to specialize in this area of the law for immigration?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm an immigrant myself. My parents brought me here at the age of 5 from Mexico, and so I grew up here, and fortunately at that time we were able to legalize fairly quickly. My dad had been here, long before we got here, and so through that connection, we were able to acquire residency and later citizenship. So there's a personal angle to this for sure for me. And I mean, I think that, ultimately, why I do it every day.
Awesome, man. We immigrated to this country. My kids are first generation. Been here a long time, but the American dream is what brought us here and is what is continuing to help us prosper.
For
So
sure.
helping people gain that status is, I'm sure, immensely fulfilling.
It is, to be honest with you. I think that, as an attorney, and I've done various, types of law. I mean, coming out of law school, I defended cities and municipalities and public entities. I did a little bit of employment law. I've done other things. And it is gratifying. I mean, if you get a win, right, to be proud of that. But I don't think anything quite compares, to getting somebody, their legal status, because it doesn't have an effect just on them, right? I mean, it's a generational impact, so yeah, I mean, it can be a pretty good feeling to get that, yeah, for clients.
I mean, speaking of that good feeling and giving our people permanent status to be here, what effect has the change in the administration or the new ICE policies had on your immigration clients?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot of fear out there. That's for sure. We get a lot of calls, right, from current clients or even prospective clients who, just basically just want to know, are they in danger? How can they defend themselves? What can they do? And so that's a lot of what's driving it, right? Is that fear, that uncertainty about what is to come and how things will change. And it's almost, I mean, it's only been about 2 weeks, right? Since new administration took power. But we've already seen quite a bit of action, right, in immigration law, and undoubtedly there'll be more. So it's almost a day-to-day thing, where things are coming up constantly. Yeah.
Based on what you've seen, of course, not legal advice, but what can people do to protect themselves in a situation like that?
Yeah. So I think that I think the biggest concern that I have is, the agencies, right? Whether it be the enforcement agencies of ICE and CBP, or whether it be the civil agency of USCIS, or even judges in immigration court, is due process issues, right? People not being given a fair shake to be able to present their claims. That's the biggest concern that I have. And we saw this, in Trump one, right, where Trump, the first administration, is what I'm talking about, is where CIS would start to deny applications for or reject applications for seemingly arbitrary reasons, right? Maybe we didn't fill out. There was a moment of time where they expected everyone to put not applicable on certain fields, right? Which had never been a practice before, but all of a sudden they just started rejecting applications for arbitrary reasons. That's what concerns me the most. I think beyond that, for people that are here without status, who either have a criminal record, who've had hearings before immigration court, or have had applications before CIS, and who also have a criminal record, or who may have outstanding orders of deportation, either issued by a judge or issued by the enforcement agencies like CBP. I think those people right now, at least, are really in the crosshairs. Those are the people that should probably have a plan, right, for how to deal with an encounter with ICE. So obviously, you can have an ICE officer show up at their house, right, if they've registered their address, right, as part of the process they've been in before. Then ICE, there's a good chance ICE at some point, right, will go knocking on their door. And at that point, it comes down to just knowing, your constitutional protection, right? And so what I'm telling people is, well, you have, number one, the right to refuse entry, if the officer does not have a signed judicial warrant. What ICE tends to use a lot is administrative warrants, which are not the same. And so we tell people, make sure if they do have a warrant, number one, don't open the door. Ask for the warrant, ask to see the warrant, have it pass through the door, right below the door, and make sure it's a judicial warrant. Make sure it's signed by a judge before you go and open the door. So that's a Fourth Amendment right, right? And so we counsel them on that. We counsel them on exercising their Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. So again, limiting or refusing to answer any questions. Again, for those people specifically, I think it's really important. Again, without the presence of an attorney. Now, immigrants don't have the right to counsel under the Constitution, unlike criminal defendants. However, they do have a right to counsel under federal law. So, although it's not a constitutional right, for especially for somebody who's vulnerable, good idea to exercise that right and seek the advice of their attorney before trying to answer any questions. And those would be the main things, right, that we counsel people who are in that kind of situation, right? Whether it's ICE showing up at their door, or whether there's an interaction, right, where they get pulled over, or whether it's a workplace raid. Obviously, we've seen all of that before. We expect that to pick up. And so at that point, it's really just about being armed and knowledgeable, right, with with that information.
The deportations that we've been seeing in the news after this administration took place, have there been deportations like this before under different administrations, from your experience?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, you have deportations right throughout, different administrations. I think, again, going back to my concern, I think the concern is about lack of due process. So, immigrants in the United States are entitled to due process, regardless of their immigration status, right? The problem is, where you have an administration that's very aggressive about immigration enforcement, they may be willing to cut corners, sometimes little corners, sometimes big corners. One of the things that has been bandied about, it hasn't been implemented formally, at least to my knowledge, is expanding what's known as expedited removal. So expedited removal is an authority that's given to immigration enforcement, usually it's CBP, to issue a removal order at the border without the involvement of a judge. Now, typically, that's reserved for cases where the individual who's trying to enter the United States has presented some kind of fraudulent application, visa, or has made a false claim to U.S. citizenship to try and gain entry. That's when you tend to see the expedited removal orders issued. However, what's been talked about is expanding that authority to have ICE issue expedited removal in cases where the individual hasn't or cannot prove that they've been in the United States continuously for 2 years. Again, that's been thrown around. As far as I know, that hasn't quite been implemented yet, but that would be very concerning, right? You can imagine a situation where an individual is driving down the street, they get pulled over, or ICE is, after them, and they don't have any evidence that they've been here for 2 years, or, ICE won't give them that opportunity to present it, or maybe ICE, the ICE agent looks the other way and, doesn't believe that they've presented enough information. And so you have the enforcement agency also acting in a judicial capacity, and of course, there's a lot of room for abuses there. So that's a big concern.
And so when you have the enforcement officer making also a judicial determination, that's when the due process corners can potentially be cut, big or small.
Right. That's a concern. That's certainly a concern. Yeah, and we've seen, most recently this week, as a matter of fact, the Lake and Riley Act get passed, and so that's a law that obligates detention of undocumented immigrants where there's been a criminal charge levied against them, not a conviction, just a charge for burglary, theft, assault of a police officer, or other crimes involving serious harm to others, or death. So obviously, nobody wants, dangerous people out in their communities, and certainly, I'm one of those. But I think that the concern here is that if we're detaining people simply based on an accusation, that again, there is room for abuse there, right? Because once you're detained, the ability to present your case, for example, the ability to gather evidence, work with your counsel is severely limited. Because especially because these detention centers tend to be, in remote areas. My office is, an earshot from downtown LA, and we have, an immigration court in downtown. But the nearest, detention center is out in Adelanto, which is, maybe an hour and a half drive from here. So there's some real practical limitations, right, to trying to defend that kind of case.
Circling back on what individual immigrants can do for themselves, having some sort of evidence on their person while they're at work or wherever where these raids may occur, do you think that would be helpful for them to be able to present their case?
Yeah, for sure. So, citizens are not required to carry proof of their citizenship. That's not a requirement. Unlike people who are, for instance, residents of the United States, they are required to carry that proof with them. So certainly, anybody that is a resident, legal resident, should carry that around with them. Anybody that has a application that's pending before the agency or before the court, they should carry that paperwork around with them, right? The likelihood that an ICE agent would go and detain somebody who's already registered with the agency, who's already has hearings or proceedings before the immigration court, it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely unless that person is determined to be a risk, a security risk, basically, to the community, right? Where they've committed some crime or something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, carrying that paperwork is going to be really helpful. And it doesn't hurt, right, to have paperwork, especially for recent arrivals, that can speak to their presence in the United States continuously for 2 years. Again, we don't have an indication that that policy has been formalized, but it's floating out there, and so in anticipation that it may be enacted, we want to be ready for that.
And do you think that we mentioned the criminal backgrounds or they had a hearing in the past? Do you think that immigrants without a criminal background or without pending charges are still at risk during these first phase ICE raids?
Well, I think there's still some risks involved. I mean, you've seen some news reports, right, of U.S. citizens, getting questioned or detained, right? So there's still risks. I think at this point, those risks are not especially poignant or not realized just yet. I think there's just a danger there, again, of abuses, right? But I think that, again, it doesn't hurt, to carry that documentation with you, right? Yeah.
Yeah. When we talk about immigration status, what does adjustment status mean for a candidate in immigration court?
Yeah, so adjustment means that you're going from one status to another, right? So you might be adjusting from a person of no status or no permanent status to a person who does have permanent status, right? That's a green card holder. But there are other adjustments. There are adjustments from say student visa to something else, or it just means a change basically in your status, right? That's technically what adjustment refers to. Most people, from a practical standpoint, when they ask about adjustment, they're asking about green cards, right? They're asking about legalizing their status permanently in the country.
Got it. So the adjustment status is going from an immigration status, whatever that may be, to a different level.
Right. Correct.
And so when people seek immigration help services from you, they're seeking an adjustment change.
Most of the time, yes. Most of the time. Although, sometimes people understand, right? Maybe they've consulted with other attorneys and they know they don't really have a claim to be able to make to get green card status. And so, barring that, then people are looking for, work permit, right? Something to be able to live and work legally in the United States. And there are some options for that. Again, right now they're more limited, they're more restricted. But yeah, I mean, that's also a possibility.
And with the U.S. kind of being the apple of the eye for immigrants, I feel like still worldwide, to be able to come here. Do you have any specific advice for asylum seekers to be able to enhance their odds to get protected status?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the groups that I think has been targeted the most, right, with these initial actions. So right now, for instance, President Trump has reenacted the Remain in Mexico policy, which was active during the COVID lockdowns. And so that policy basically obligates asylum seekers presenting their claims at the border to remain in Mexico, if that's the border where they presented their claim, to remain there pending hearings in the immigration court. So the first go around, you'd have people transported from these border communities like Tijuana, Mexicali, into courts along the border, right? So it might be San Diego. There are others, right? In El Centro and throughout Texas. So you have that, okay, and of course that makes it very difficult for somebody to be able to present their claim in the best possible light or in the best possible way, because usually in Mexico they're not residents there. They're in a precarious situation, particularly in Mexico, where asylum seekers, immigrants have been targeted, by organized crime, and so yeah, it's a mess, on that front. For refugees, right? These are people who are applying into the asylum program, the refugee program from abroad, and getting resettled into the United States. Those have been suspended right now. So right now we're not doing any refugee resettlement. When that'll change, how that'll change is up for debate. We don't know just yet. I think what somebody can do is obviously saving evidence, right? That is going to help their claim. Making sure that that evidence is maybe backed up in various locations. I know how many times, I've had clients come to me and say, "Well, I had the evidence on my phone, and my phone got stolen." Right? People, for instance, and so that's a problem, right? Because now you don't have the evidence that maybe could have made a difference. So having the evidence, right, backed up maybe in the cloud, I mean that's going to be really helpful, right, to somebody who wants to do that.
So has the current stance for the administration changed for asylum seekers, that they have to remain in the country that they're trying to enter from while their case proceeds through the immigration courts?
Yeah, so not quite to that extent just yet. But there are more restrictions. I mean, there certainly are more restrictions. So they are working on trying to designate, particularly countries. I believe what's been floated is the possibility of designating El Salvador as a safe third country, which might allow the administration to obligate people to try and claim asylum or claim status there before coming into the United States, right, and doing the same here. I mean, you started to see that already during Biden, where he instituted a policy referred to as the safe third country policy, which basically just makes it harder for somebody to claim asylum in the United States if they cannot show that they tried to claim asylum in another country that they were passing through, right? I mean, if they were in the country, they had the opportunity at least to claim that status, and if they didn't do it, then that makes the possibility of getting asylum, right, much more difficult. Now, that wouldn't necessarily apply for somebody who's maybe has a visa to come into the country. They're here already, and then they decide to apply for asylum, right, because they're here already. Thus far, the changes and the propositions for changes wouldn't apply to those people just yet. But again, things seem to change every day. Yeah.
What changes do you hope to see in this administration or any other next administration for our U.S. immigration system, working in it so detailed as you have been?
Yeah. Well, I think there are different things that should be done. I think that certainly one thing, and it's not necessarily a law specific issue, right? But particularly for Central and South America, instituting a foreign policy that is going to prop up those economies, that's going to make the security situation specifically, right, in other countries better, right, where people are not needing to travel abroad, right, and seek asylum maybe somewhere else, or even immigration for economic reasons, right. I think that's definitely one area where maybe we haven't, as a country, right, paid enough attention to. That's one thing. The other thing I think that would be great to see is a consideration for people, a greater consideration, I should say, for people with children, U.S. citizen children here in the United States. So one of the big problems in immigration law is the lack of a practical way for people who are here without documentation but who have U.S. citizen children. The lack of a practical way of getting from no status to green card, right? Because the way the law is written right now, if that is the only qualifying relative that you can claim is a U.S. citizen child, when that child turns 21, that child can file a petition for his or her parents. But those parents, if they came here without documentation, have to depart the United States and remain outside of the country for up to 10 years before they're allowed to return with lawful immigrant status. And so the only way around that 10-year bar is if the immigrant also has a spouse or a parent who's a resident or a citizen. But a lot of these people don't have that relationship. And so they're kind of stuck in this awkward legal place where they have U.S. citizen children. Maybe they've been here 10, 20, 30 years, but there's no practical way for them to be able to adjust their status and get their green card here. Now that
So if they don't have a spouse and their children are over 21, but it's not practical or feasible for them to leave the country for 10 years,
for 10 years,
they're just
yeah.
kind of in this low state of unsure status.
Well, I mean, they can have their kid file the petition for them, but I mean that doesn't get them the green card. That just gives them the opening for the green card. But then the ability to actually get it is a real problem there. And before 9/11, there was this law that would be renewed every so often. It was called the Life Act, where it allowed people to pay a penalty for coming into the country without authorization, but allowed them to file for an adjustment of status here. Under the INA, it's 245I. Now, what ended up happening is that law got cut off for petitions that were filed for beneficiaries as of April 30th, 2001. So everyone that had petitions filed for them on or before that date got grandfathered, right, to be able to seek adjustment of status here. But everyone who had petitions filed for them thereafter, they're the ones that are forced basically to do that consular processing. In other words, having to leave the United States and be subject to a 10-year bar. So, it's still a big problem. And I think it's an area that's really ripe for legislative attention.
Well, Ruben, I mean, I've learned a lot about immigration law today from you. I appreciate this conversation, and I hope the listeners of this podcast get some useful information that they can use to protect themselves and to protect their family members. And most importantly, how would they get in touch with you so that they can protect them?
So social media, Espinoza Law Group, we're active, and website, right, EspinozaLawGroup.com, and our phone number is 213-228-3232. And I hope everyone can do whatever they can, right, to stay safe, to keep their families safe during these trying times, we'll keep up the good fight and do everything we can, right, to protect our community.
You're the man, Ruben. Keep fighting the good fight. I appreciate talking to you today, and I hope we can meet in person soon. We're both in LA.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Harry.
Thanks for joining us today on Harry Handles It. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and found some valuable takeaways. If you're facing challenges in your own life or business, remember that you're not alone. Together, we can handle anything that comes our way. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review if you liked what you heard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and handling life with confidence.